Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. This is The World This Week. With us, Ulrike, KOLTERMANN, freelance reporter. Also with us, Sarai, SUAREZ, Venezuelan reporter and photojournalist. Judah GRUNSTEIN of World Politics Review, which you can find at
www.worldpoliticsreview.com.
And also with us, Hassan ZITOUNI, London-based, often here in Paris for Saudi channel NBC, from Algeria. Let's talk for just a minute about Algeria, if you will. The president spending a fair part of the past year recovering from a stroke in France. So some were surprised when Algeria's prime minister last Saturday announced that his 76-year-old boss was seeking a fourth term. Bouteflika appearing on national television Monday in the company of Kuwait's foreign minister. But once again, there was no public statement in front of a microphone. Your thoughts about this new run for president by Bouteflika?
As you know, I have presented myself as a candidate for this election, so I am officially running for this election.
You're running for president?
Yes.
As a journalist?
Yeah, but they won't allow me because I have British citizenship.
Why did you do that?
I wanted to raise the concerns of so many Algerians who have got fed up with this one political party that is controlling Algeria since 1954. They led the revolution and they stayed in power after independence, and they are still there. I am referring to FLN. Bouteflika is part and parcel of that party, one party leading Algeria. And I believe that the Algerians have got fed up with this regime. They want change, real change on the ground. And
why is he being put up again for re-election?
I don't think if the president is up to run for a fourth term, but his entourage.
We've been hearing publicly a lot of mudslinging, which is unusual. Public mudslinging among the higher-ups.
Yes, it's a big struggle now, power struggle between the president and his entourage. The military who are asking him not to run for a fourth term. And it all comes to who controls the real power, which is the money, the petrol, the oil. And I think President Bouteflika has made a big mistake, or he will be making a big mistake if he accepts to run for a fourth term. I think he should leave power now. I was against the idea of him changing the constitution to start with a few years ago, when it was only 2 terms for the presidency. He allowed himself for the third term under the pretension or pretending that Algeria needs him, Algeria needs stability, Algeria needs security, and he is the man to...
All right, and one final question on this. Can Algeria make a soft landing to more political pluralism, or is that impossible under the current circumstances?
With this regime in power and with this stand, I think we are heading for a really volatile and dangerous situation, and I think the uprising will come soon if the regime doesn't take into account the aspirations of the youth people, especially the young generation.
Ulrike, KOLTERMANN.
I think it's shocking what we see and what we observe in Algeria, because on the one side there is Bouteflika, who hasn't appeared in public since nearly a year, and TV only shows him seated, so in a very bad shape. And then there is his opponent, the head of the intelligence service, who is also high in the 70s. So it looks like a conflict between dinosaurs, and they really should look at a country like Tunisia, where for the first time an Arabic state has put equal rights for men and women into their constitution, and that shows the way forward. But compared with this, in Algeria, everything seems to be blocked, and there's such a paradox situation that this country is so rich in oil revenues on the one hand, and on the other hand you have this high youth unemployment. So young people in Algeria have no perspective despite the richness of the country. So there is a huge problem, and Bouteflika is obviously the last person who is able to fix these problems.
Yeah, he has done well, sorry to interrupt. He has done well. He has helped Algeria to get rid of its foreign debts. That's over 40 billion. He has paid that. That's very good. He has helped in terms of bringing some hope to the people by creating some jobs. But
Yeah, he can retire now.
He has to retire now, and that's where we have where the Algerians are.
You were asking about a soft landing, and there are two problems in terms of this regime and a soft landing. The first is one of the reasons I suspect, without being a specialist on Algerian politics, but in general with this kind of regime, one of the reasons why Bouteflika is being pushed forward to run is because it's almost like postponing the inevitable. If there's a vacuum of power, it's almost more dangerous because then then it could become really violent. The second thing is you have this whole leadership generation that has been in power since independence, with no next generation, no one to pass the baton on to, because they haven't a political system that regenerates and that's stable and that has continuity. It generates the next generation of leaders. It promotes young people into positions of authority. There are people there to pass the baton to. Here, it seems like there's nothing. There's nothing there afterwards. Everyone, it's this battle for power at the top, and they're all in their 70s and some even in their 80s, 80 years old. I mean, I found myself wondering if Bouteflika even knows that he's running for president, which is pretty extraordinary.
He's playing with fire. I mean, I can compare that with what Chavez did with the election. He was sick. Everybody knew he was very, very sick. The situation was very, very delicate. We are talking about playing with fire in an oil country. I mean, it can be a very big problem. And with the youth in the streets with no jobs, it's a very volatile situation.
And let's talk about Venezuela. Mass protests now in their third week. The president of 10 months who replaced the late Hugo Chavez, responding with a bold plan, the extension of Carnival Week, adding Thursday and Friday to the long holiday weekend. And it is true, Sarah SUAREZ, that anti-Chavistas, those who are against the current government, have come out in far fewer numbers in the capital, at least they did on Thursday.
In the capital and in other cities of the country, really, what we see mainly in the few medias that are covering what's going on in Venezuela is in the capital, but also the social medias have been replacing the media that are not really informing what's going on in the rest of the cities. I come from a city that is called Mérida, for example, which is in the Andes, and Mérida and Táchira are the two main cities that are leading this battle in the streets. The repression in those two cities, Mérida and San Cristobal, are terrible and massively. The police and the National Guards are really attempting to the human rights in the way they're proceeding to stop the riots and the demonstrations. And it's a situation that is completely out of hands of the opposition and of the government, because it started with a spontaneous movement of the young students in a university requesting security and requesting more respect of their rights. And now they're facing a situation that is mixing all the problems in the city, economical, security problems, and all sorts of catastrophes that we have been living in the last few years.
I was going to say, the mix of different issues has sometimes been confusing to the outside eye. It started on campuses, this protest. The problem was corruption. And here in Europe, the debate has been about Chavismo.
Yes, but actually it started with the students requesting security, and now it was a few days after that, it was recovered by a certain part of the opposition leaders who decide to capitalize on what was going on with the students, and they make a whole mix of all the problems that we have in the country. And it's true that in Europe, the vision is just very simple. It's against an ideology, and it's just a political problem. But it's more than that. In the beginning, people were not requesting Maduro to leave the power. They were just requesting him to do his job, and the ministries as well. And now, well, it has evaluated to a point that nobody knows actually what they're requesting. And the opposition leader, Ulrike, is trying to put some order in all that, and trying to conduct the revolts and the demonstrations to translate it in a political strategy and tactic.
Hassan ZITOUNI, again, this the country that, according to OPEC, sits on the world's largest oil reserves.
Yeah, they produce 2.7 million barrels a day. They, like Algeria, very rich country, but somehow they couldn't run and manage the country. Today, I was listening...
Although a lot of people have come out of poverty in the past decade.
They have, but I went to Caracas a few times and I covered the elections there. And when you are in Caracas, two words. You have a word for the poor and another word for the rich. It is divided in two. And but I think the regime bears the blame for what's happening, because they have the money, like in Algeria. They have they can manage their country. They can change the lives of the people, but they are not doing it, and I don't understand why.
Well,
I was going to say the problems that that Venezuela is facing and that are causing the protests now are not necessarily new. The violence has been around for quite a while.
We're talking about crime.
The criminal violence,
yes.
Day-to-day violence, insecurity in the streets. The economic problems in terms of inflation and things like that have been around now for quite some time. There are two things that are missing. The first is Chavez, the charisma that he had, and the fierce attachment and devotion that his political followers had to him as a political leader. And the second is the oil revenues, because after the financial crisis, oil revenues dropped for Venezuela, and the problem was that Venezuela has brought people out of poverty, but their model for doing it wasn't the same as, for instance, in Brazil. They didn't manage their oil revenues the way that Chile managed its copper revenues. So they threw money at the problem. They gave services away instead of cash transfers, for instance, which have been shown to be more effective. And the second thing is they've been subsidizing cheap oil for the entire region of like-minded governments in the Caribbean and in South America. So, in other words, Chavez, his charisma, and the money from oil were able to paper over these problems. Those are gone now, and it's now bubbling up.
Ulrike, I was just going to say, the comment from one of the viewers, while eyes are turned towards Ukraine, don't forget the protesters in Venezuela. People around the world, very emotional when it comes to Venezuela. They're either completely behind the Chavismo or completely against it.
Yeah, but that is because of Chavez's charisma, and his successor doesn't have the same charisma. But when we talk about things that are missing now, we can also look at the continent as a whole, and it's weird, but there's very little reaction from other Latin American countries. Like Brazil should be able to say something, because there's a spiral of violence now, that violence from the opposition, repression, so it's going on, and things are getting out of hand. And there are very important other Latin American countries who could do something about it and have some influence in Venezuela, and so far it's not happening.
All right, both Judah and Ulrike saying that Hugo Chavez's successor lacks his charisma. Nicolas Maduro, who, while all this has been going on, has been sending out olive branches, both to Washington after the tit-for-tat expulsion of diplomats, and to the opposition.
How much longer will there be intolerance and hate? Venezuela no longer wants hate. Venezuela no longer wants protests. Venezuela wants peace, tolerance, love, and coexistence.
Sarai, SUAREZ.
Yeah, I was thinking about something that says, historian from Venezuela, she was saying that this government can't understand that popular mobilizations can be used against them. They believe they have the monopoly of the street, and that nobody can say anything against what they do. And finally, they teach people to take the words and to go out and to say what they think. I mean, that's in words what they were trying to implement as a government. And so now they don't like people responding to their bad management. You were talking about the poors that were now not poors anymore, and that's not really true, because actually Hector Rodriguez, who is the Ministry of Education, says a few days ago that we're not going to take you out of poverty. We're not going to make you pass to middle class, because you will become against us. I mean, that shows really the
right,
logical
but the figures
of the
on
government.
income on income for Venezuela show a sharp rise over the past decade.
Because they have been doing these missions, which are social programs that have helped a lot of people. Actually, it's completely truth. And when we talk about missing Chavez, in comparing him to Maduro, Chavez was a leader he really knew how to manage the street, how to manage the humors of people, how to deal with everybody in a certain way, even if he was very furious in certain occasions. But he knew how to manage the feeling of the country. Maduro doesn't have the same ability, and it's really has a big consequence in what's going on right now. His way to manage the country and his explosive way to solve problems that is not at all compared to what Chavez used to do.
All right, let's stay in that part of the world. 13 years after his last jailbreak, Mexico's most wanted drug lord back behind bars, Joaquin Guzman, also known as El Chapo. I guess you could translate as Shorty or the stocky one. I don't know which is better. The head of the notorious Sinaloa cartel.
The arrest of one of the most internationally wanted drug lords confirms the efficiency of the Mexican state. But in no way should this be a reason to fall into triumphalism.
Certainly no triumphalism, if you will, in Culiacan, where on Wednesday, more than 1,000 turned out to demand the release of El Chapo, complete with brass bands playing songs known to be favorites of Guzman. Judah GRUNSTEIN. Is this a good news story, the arrest of El Chapo?
Sure. I mean, the problem with it is that it sort of shows a lot of contradictions, a lot of things that aren't too clear. I mean, for instance, Peña Nieto, when he came into power, he announced that he was going to stop the policy of going after the kingpins. Doesn't seem to have been the case. He said he was going to stop the war on drugs.
Well, there's a question of, was he the one who stopped it, or did the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency?
There's that too. I mean, he said he was going to stop the war on drugs. He sent the military into to Michoacan, where there's now the self-defense groups. There was a question about how close cooperation was going to be with the United States. Obviously, in this case, apparently the United States had the last word. So it's also been shown that the kingpin strategy doesn't necessarily lead to a long-term or a sustainable reduction in trafficking. So all these things, yeah, it's a good story, or it's good news, because someone like that you don't necessarily want out on the streets running his business. The problem is that in Mexican prisons, apparently it's not that difficult to run your business from inside. So he might just have changed his address for the next 20 or 30 years without necessarily changing his job.
Juan on Twitter saying El Chapo Guzman could end the national debt, something the White House can't do.
Great idea. But there was also some talk now maybe to extradite him to the U.S., but I think it's not a good idea because...
Well, the Mexicans have said that's off the table for now.
Exactly, and it would be a very good sign if if Mexico can deal with it, because it's a very important signal that law can be enforced in Mexico. So.
All right, El Chapo behind bars means also fears of scores settling in Mexico to fill the power vacuum. It's also reviving questions of why, despite Mexico's war on drugs, not just homicides have skyrocketed. We can show you the U.S. government figures on heroin production in Mexico, and you see that 2006 is when that war on drugs by the current president's predecessor started, and we see how it's just skyrocketed since. Sarai, SUAREZ, what's the way forward?
The way Latin America has been dealing with the drugs problem is a big issue, because when you stop one of these big fish, you have the business that is spread all over, and there is new dealers and new chief that appears from here and there. In Venezuela, we're having the consequences of the regulation of the drug business in Colombia, because we became a sort of road to pass the drug through Venezuela. We don't produce, but we're having a whole road, and there is militaries involved in that, and the drug comes to Europe through that road. I mean, so what is going to happen in Mexico when this guy is not there, but he can deal the business from jail? That's completely, perfectly possible in our context. Latin America is very amazing for that. You have someone in jail who has a telephone and fax and everything they need to run their business. So there is a lot of reasons to be worried, and we will see how this ends. But I think it's very difficult to have an idea of how this detention is going to end up.
And again, it's very confusing to us. We get, like, for instance, one viewer saying, El Chapo's a genius, that man is incredible. I don't know if that's the case, but...
I read a little bit about the story of the life of this person. He was born in a very poor area of Venezuela where there was nothing, Mexico. And now he has a wife who lives in the USA with twin children, and why it took so long to arrest him? I think there is... link. We have seen movies, we have seen documentaries that when we talk about drugs and the trade in this business, there are so many parties involved, and I think the US government takes the blame for allowing this kind of trade to continue at their border. I think they should have stopped it a long time ago.
To the GRUNSTEIN?
Well, in answer to, in terms of the question of is El Chapo a genius, the drug business is a business. It's a business that's as hard to manage as any other business, with the exception that it's all cash and you can't take a complaint to court to settle a contract dispute. So yeah, he's probably a very gifted businessman. In terms of the United States, and I think the United States responsibility. Without question, the United States decision 15, 20 years ago, or even more than that now, I guess, to really put the accent and the emphasis on interdiction and on outlawing drugs, the war on drugs, has created this sort of cascade of cause and effect. So there's one channel to get the drugs into the United States. The United States closes that. That was Mexico, or one part of Mexico. So it shifts to another part of Mexico. It shifts to Central America and the Caribbean. It shifts to Venezuela. It's a problem that's incredibly difficult to solve because people want the illegal drugs. It's incredibly lucrative, and people are willing to take the risk to supply it. So once you have those three circumstances reunited, it's pretty difficult to find a solution, whether it's in terms of supply side or demand side.
We're going to finish north of the border. On Sunday, it's the Academy Awards in Los Angeles. Here in Paris this Friday, French cinema's equivalent, the César Awards. True, it's not the same scale or star power, although Quentin Tarantino will be giving Scarlett Johansson a Lifetime Achievement Award tonight. But some might contend that Hollywood is getting more artsy, dare we say it, more French. Let's look at the contenders for Best Picture at the Academy Awards this year. Gravity, 12 Years a Slave, and American Hustle, a three-way race going on there. Ulrike KOLTERMANN, do you get the sense when you look at the movies that are up for Oscars that there is more of it? It's getting a little more French in a way?
Yeah, probably it is. And let me bet, I would say 12 Years a Slave.
You're going to bet 12 Years a Slave. Okay. Sarai, SUAREZ, your thoughts?
I think I'm staying in the same line, yeah. 12 Years a Slave.
Which is sort of the same kind of movie that often wins the Oscars, a film where you overcome adversity.
Yeah, but the Oscars are that. They have created this, we're used to that kind of films in the Oscar. We're kind of disappointed if we don't get this kind of films on the Oscars, so as a winner.
All right, the BAFTAs seem to get more star power than the Césars.
Yes, the BAFTA are more popular, but I believe that this movie, I haven't seen it, but many people talked about 12 Years a Slave, and I don't know what are the criteria now to judge a good movie. Are they Is it the picture? Is it the story? Is it, we are a little
Is
bit.
it the skin color of the filmmaker, maybe?
I'm pretty surprised. I just saw American Hustle last weekend, and I'm shocked that it's actually nominated for Best Picture. I was pretty disappointed by it. I think in terms of getting nominated, one of the criteria is politicking in Hollywood and having the budget to pay the right people to have your film talked about and maybe put on the nomination list. But
all right, political campaigning ruling the day there. A cynical Judah Grunstein, thank you for joining us. I want to thank Ulrike KOLTERMANN, Hassan ZITOUNI. I also want to thank Sarai SUAREZ. Thank you for joining us here for The World This Week.